Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, long-time collaborator with Tom DeLonge of Blink-182, among other things. And I'm here to celebrate the release of our new novel, Trinity. Tom and I are both traveling at the moment, so we wanted to do something online to celebrate the release. So here's a little conversation that we had about this book, about what we're working on, what he's been doing, life with Blink, and so on. Hope you like it.
Hi,
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm good. I was just talking to the president real quick
I
of
would
the
expect
United
no less.
States.
So, we've been told there's a bunch of stuff we're not allowed to talk about. So, I figure we will focus mostly on this.
Fancy that is.
I know, right?
Fancy.
And it's got the little, all the gold print inside and all that stuff.
Really love the cover. That cover looks like a, I don't know, it just looks like such the quintessential kind of novel like cover. It's kind of like got the big explosion, you got the UFO in there. I don't know. I got the old cool old car.
So, I
Uh,
mean, the last time I had you on this channel was a little over 2 years ago, and I had long hair.
I'm younger now and I look younger.
That's right.
Yeah.
And as soon as when I turned off the recording, you said, "Okay, so just so you know, I'm back in the studio with Blink, and we're going on tour."
Oh,
And
geez.
nobody, and that was news. And I sat on that information for like 7 months. So don't tell me I can't keep secrets. Um,
Yeah.
and then you went on the road. So maybe we should start quickly by just, I
And I'm
mean,
still on the road. We're
I
still doing that.
know.
It's insane. It's like the never ending tour. Yeah,
How
no,
has
that
how has that been?
it's good. It's exhausting. And we're traveling like the best a band can travel. Like we got a private jet, and like I'll take helicopters sometimes, and we got like you stay in the nicest hotels and stuff. And so it's like it's hard to sit there and gonna go, how can you be so? Because I remember when we were younger and you're in a van, and we would literally be begging people to stay at their house because we couldn't afford a hotel room. I mean, I remember specifically those days. And I remember one girl brought us home to her house, and her mom comes down the stairs, and us and our friends that were touring with all the, they're like 7 dudes, just dirty, just sleeping on our living room floor. And her mom's like, "What is going on?" She's like, "It's okay. They just needed a place to stay." And this whole mother-daughter thing, and they lived in a condo, so it wasn't even like a single family house. It was just like, I mean, it must have been. We had green hair and stuff. I mean, I always remember that thinking like, what kind of relationship is between the mom and the daughter where the daughter thought that was cool to do, like so now we travel like the best we can possibly travel,
So
but
this
like,
is why you didn't stay at my house when you came to Charlotte.
yeah,
This is what you're
that's
telling
the primary reason is because we already had a hotel. But
me.
it's just tiring still because every single day, I think it's like that dopamine. I mean, every day you're traveling either to a new country in Europe, every day you're in a different country, or you're in a different state. But there's a lot of like laying around doing. First, if you wake up in the morning and you're super tired because you didn't go to bed till 3 in the morning, and then you got to somehow get up and going and get some coffee, and you have this crazy dopamine crash because the show was all massive the night
Mhm.
before, and then you get on a plane and travel to the next city. They said traffic and try to get to the hotel. They're all, okay, go put your bags in the hotel, but we're all meeting down here in 45 minutes to get a sound check. So you get back in the van and you're in traffic and you get to sound check, and your body still doesn't work. You can't even sing at like 4 in the afternoon because it's like it's essentially breakfast for you or something. Like it just
Mhm.
your schedule's all off, so you're just trying to like just try and make enough noise to where it works, and then you got to sit there and you're exhausted for like hours until you play, and then like it's some you can't even really hear the crowd because these venues are so big. Like your dress room's kind of quiet off down some weird hallway. So
Mhm.
I'm always playing music or whatever. And then next thing you know, I got a big clock. I have these big road cases that have like stereo and TV and stuff in it, so I can hang on my dressing room. You got this clock that's like counting down, and like as soon as we get within like 2 hours of the show, I'm like, I still don't feel like I've woken up yet. I'm like, I still feel like it kind of feels like like you've been up all night long drinking with your friends, you know, and then like the next day you just want to take it easy at home, we went out last night, I'm exhausted, I'm just gonna lay in bed and watch movies. But that's like the feeling you have for like 6 to 8 weeks straight on a tour, you know. It's just exhausting, you know. So um, I don't know. That's what it's like. Yeah. But it's fun. The shows are fun. I'm saying all this negative stuff, but the shows are like epic. I mean, it's crazy. It's a rush, you know. You got like it's just so big, and like you always like lasers and pyrotechnics and moving screens, and really makes the dick jokes come off in a way that you never thought dick jokes would come off, you know.
And I mean, it's been a while since you guys were all working together. You've all gone through a lot of life stuff in the meantime. Has it been like just sort of riding a bike, getting back where you were, or is it different?
Yeah, it really is like riding a bike. I mean, it's those relationships you have in your life that's like family, you know, where like you have all your issues with each other, but you're still family, so you figure it out. It's fucking, you know,
Mm,
you
mm.
you have like so much history, and you can't. It's like you look at each other, I can't quit you. It's like it's always that like all right, we're back here again. It's like the girl you've been dating and like you've broken up 80 times, but you're like, ah, fuck it. We're gonna be together forever, you know, and probably break up 80 more times too. But we're in a good spot. I mean, like we all I think we all really value the band in a way that we never have. I mean, we always valued it. We've always known that we
Mm.
were tremendously lucky. I mean, and but we actually now are really trying to protect it in a way that we didn't do in the past. Where there's so much ego and immaturity involved on everyone's part, mine included, you know, where we would like say things or throw temper tantrums and just storm out. And now we can't really do that. There's like too much like stress, money, and fucking contracts on the line to we can't just storm out of the room and say fuck off. You know, well, there's a stadium
Mhm.
show in a couple of days. You know, you can't really do that. So what we do instead though, I think is like really try to we're really trying to protect what we got and treat it with a lot more honor and respect and we're having a lot of fun. I mean, the like the one saving grace with this band has always been when we got on stage, it shreds, you know, and it's just like we're just like this, we're our own little thing, you know. It's like there's no band out there that I've ever seen other than certain smaller punk rock bands that get on stage and can just get away with anything they want to get away with and say whatever they want to say and the dumber it is or the you know, it's like the better it gets, you know. And so that's just a really rad place to be in a band because you feel, you know, the pressure. There's always pressures, but you don't feel like this overwhelming pressure to be perfect. Blink's like, oh, we fucked up a song. Should we play it two more times to prove we know how to do it? Or, you know, and you know, we don't know. Let's turn all the lights off and play a song in the dark, you know, whatever. Like
Huh.
we just fuck around. So it feels like we're still exactly who we've always been, and so that magic always exists when we get on stage, and then we don't have to worry about all the other shit that usually puts so much pressure on a band where they're, you know, freaking the fuck out because their microphone went out or the one of the guys in the band gets more light than they get or something. You know, like
Mhm.
we're just, you know, we're keeping it real, I guess.
And you're going to be doing this for a while, right? There's a lot more tour to go, and
Yeah, well, gosh, I leave in a couple weeks for the US tour, which is 10 weeks long. And then I got to go to Europe for a couple
so you'll
weeks.
probably be on tour by the time this video goes public.
Yeah, I'll probably be that in that tired zombie state I was telling you about for sure. Um, yes, I'll be the 10-week US tour, and then we go to Europe for like a couple weeks. And then I think we have like a couple shows, like festivals in the States or something, and then we're done until like next summer, is the idea. So that'll be nice. It's
So,
interesting. We just had 2 months off, and I just kind of go always wonder, I'm like, fuck, am I forgetting how the songs go? You know, because we play like 26 songs, but we have like a 40 or 50 that we're kind of that we know kind of like that we want to potentially play. But if you give me 6 months off, I'll probably fucking forget everything. I'm kind of scared about that bigger break coming.
well, it's not like you're not doing anything in between times.
I am busy. I am busy, and so are you. Not just me.
Yeah,
You are too.
yeah, this is true.
Usually,
Um,
when I get an idea, you end up very busy. And that's kind of how it's been for the past you said it was 10 years. I haven't known you for 10 years, have I?
Yeah, I think I happen to be going through some old emails, and I think that the first introductions that we had, the first time we spoke on the phone was 10 years ago in September. So it's just
That
shy.
really that makes you look bad to think that you would be working with me for 10 years. I mean, people are going to question your psychological, like,
Well, it's
levels of
having massive. It's boosting my status as a Shakespeare professor, no end, as you
to
can
think,
imagine.
to think a Shakespeare professor would work with the guy in Blink-182 makes zero sense. Like nothing about that is good for your tenure and all that. What does a professor get?
Yeah.
Like, I this the dean comes in and goes, "There's an issue here. Is this the guy that you choose to work with?"
It sounds like the beginning of a joke, right? A Shakespeare professor and a punk rocker going to a bar.
Yeah, but Shakespeare's pretty punk rock. Think about the stuff he did back in the day, right? That was
Yeah.
pretty forward thinking and probably created a lot of there's a lot of controversy with him, wasn't it? Wasn't that the
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
In and
good.
out of jail. So, amongst the stuff that you're doing when you're not with Blink is the stuff that we're doing together. And as I said, by the time this video comes out, this will be out. So, you want to talk a little bit about where the idea came from, what you were particularly going for, what you were interested in, and then how we brought it to fruition in terms of the novel.
Yeah, so being around so many people that have had just insight and access and you know, larger thinking than most on the UFO phenomenon. There's always, you can always look back and UFOs are always very actively showing up where our nuclear weapons were, anything to do with nuclear weapons, nuclear tests, and things of that nature. Um, so I had, someone important posit a hypothetical to me that I took to be a very pointed pointed conversation on a very purposeful conversation because of who the person was. And back in 1963, there was a nuclear test in space called Starfish Prime. Now, anyone can go out there and read about Starfish Prime, and you can go on Wikipedia and see all about it. And the idea of it was to really see what an electromagnetic pulse would do in the vacuum of space, the EMP wave. Now, the EMP wave is what we hear about. If a nuke goes off, it'll shut off all of our electricity and burn all of our electrical, systems and whatever. So one of the fears we've always had as a country is, would the Soviets detonate a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere above America, and just that the EMP wave would come down and just wipe us back to the Stone Age, all of our computers, all of our phone lines, everything. So we definitely have had those fears, and so have other countries. So when Starfish Prime was one of the attempts to launch something into space and test how that EMP wave would travel. What's interesting about it is when you look it up and read about it, it actually did take out a satellite or two, is what it discusses. Well,
Mm.
I have very high reason to believe that maybe it did take out a satellite, but it really brought down something else as well. And then the question becomes, did we know that it might bring something else down? And or maybe a few of us knew, and the rest of the people on the team did not know. They just thought they were testing something in space. So I had some pretty deep, meaningful conversations about Starfish Prime with the right people. And so what I wanted to do was, because there's something important about what it brought down. I mean, what it brought down led to a shift in thinking about what's here and what we thought of the UFO phenomenon. So for me, I wanted to create a story that can house some of that information and kind of look at it in a new way. But I'm also, you know, always looking to do a story that I can relate to. And what's rad is back in 1963, you have like this whole greaser culture. You have like the beginnings of punk rock music, which is really what these kids are. These are street kids getting in fist fights, listening to hard rock. Now at the time, it's like, Elvis and whatever, but it really is the same spirit. It's like these degenerates, these iconoclasts, these kids that don't fit in with the rich kids, and class warfare was so much stronger in our country in Western culture than it might have. I mean, we still have it to this day, but like I look at like my kids and kids now in high school, and there's so much more tolerance in high schools now. I'm not saying it's fixed. There's still racism and all these different things, but there's more tolerance about kids' sexual identities or about being bullied and this and that. It's not fixed, but it's infinitely better than when I was in school. When I was in school, everyone was segregated.
Mm.
The skateboarders were here, the punk rock kids were here with the Mohawks, the skinheads were over here, the fucking heavy metal kids that we call Hessians were over here. No one was really into hip hop yet. It was just starting, in
Mm.
the early 90s. And so you just had these like very fragmented groups, and those groups were always, those are like in where I grew up, there was like punk rock gangs. Like if you got in a fight with this one group of kids, their entire group would show up and they're all punk rock skate. They would just beat the shit out of you. Like, so there's always like this tribal warfare in these neighborhoods and stuff. But if you go back to the 60s, I mean, this is like, it's even worse, and so I just related to a lot of that kind of those tribes on the streets and the beginnings of hard rock music. Because really with hard rock music, or rock and roll in general, I should say, is that rock and roll's job is to be super authentic. And pop music is not. Like pop music, you can go out and create the catchiest dance song and be infinitely bigger for a moment in time. Rock and roll's job is different. Like, who is the guy singing the song, and do I really know who they are, and where do they come from, and does he have a distinct point of view that makes me see the world through his eyes, and then I relate to it, so on and so forth. And so you back in the early 60s, these greasers and the car culture and stuff, it's very much that they had this attachment to rock and roll, rockabilly, all this different stuff that was very much a way to get your angst out. You turn up the music, you hear it loud, and it's like you want to jump around, you want to break something. That's my experience growing up with punk rock music too, and that's what a lot of people's experience is with rock and roll. Nobody growing up with AC/DC ever put AC/DC on and just wanted to sit back and have a cigarette. You put it on, you're like, oh, I'll get a beer, let's go outside, and like, it's like that's what rock and roll does. So what we did was, at least in my mind, what I was thinking is how do we package this nuclear test into a cultural moment, into a something that people can relate to, and something that would separate it from all other stories. Because I felt like the story of Starfish Prime itself needed to be told, of what happened and what I believe happened. And but to do that, I wanted to put it into a vehicle that made me kind of remember what it was like being a kid growing up on the streets with hard rock music, and like, trying to find your way in like a really shitty town, which is kind of really how I felt about my own town. And I think a lot of people probably felt that way about their own towns. So that's really like this the ingredients of how I look at these films and books and stories that I'm involved with, is like, how do we take something that's important that I really want to get out there, but package it within something that is a fun ride, an emotional ride, and a cultural kind of ride to some degree. But it really comes to life once you come in and really start thinking about like the details, because me, like I'm a macro level thinker.
Mm.
I can see things as like this big shape, but like the pieces to make that shape, it takes a lot more skills, a lot more skill to do that. And you're just like, once you feel something and you're passionate about something and you sink your teeth into something, it becomes a completely different animal, and that's what I love about novelists and good novelists. It's just the descriptions, the like, it just, when the words are just dripping off the page and you're just like, oh, because you don't have that. We don't have that in songwriting all the time.
Right.
It's got to rhyme and I can only put 4 words there. And it's like, when I'm fucking, like I'm stuck. But in a book,
I mean, but that's unusual for you, right? Because yeah, most of the time when I talk to people, I'm always amazed at how few people read, books. And you know, and we're a very visual generation. You know, we think in terms of movies and TV all the time and such. But you actually read, and you know, when you respond to the stuff that I send you, and you're talking about sentence level stuff and how the words that to me is always a sort of surprise and a delight.
Yeah, it makes the things that I respond to are I mean, the reason I do is because not only I think are you enormously talented, you can just adapt different styles so easily. You can write a fantasy book, a sci-fi book, or you can write a geopolitical thriller. I mean, people look at Secret Machines. That's not science fiction. That's more historical fiction. That's
Mhm.
it's something more in that world. And it does, if you want to tell that story, like your brain can literally just go in there and live there as though that's all you've ever written about. And so number one, it makes it easy when you have a good writer. But the second thing is I'm really passionate about um, I don't do well with just like made up fiction in the sense of where it's like, you know what, here's a really great story about a girl that works at a coffee shop and she meets somebody and they fall in love and they open up another coffee shop. It could be the best, most well-written thing in the world, and it's going to make a really great romantic movie one day. But that literally didn't do a fucking thing for my life. Like it didn't do a fucking thing. I am no better off watching that fucking movie and reading that book, so I won't get into it.
Mhm.
But if we take like some of the things we're working on, you're like, okay, so you're telling me there's a real nuclear test that happened. You're telling me we did it in space to see what the fuck would happen. That maybe a few people knew that something might go down if we do this. Literally, as like figuratively and literally, and that's a pretty scary thing. Like that's a big fucking deal. That's a big deal that we're toying with nuclear weapons and we're going to go explode one in space to see what happens. And there's only a few guys on the hundreds of people working on this thing that are saying, oh, yeah, there's something else might happen if we do that, but we're not going to tell everybody, but we're going to sit there and we're going to hold our breath and piss our pants because we don't really know what we're doing. We're just playing with like extremely dangerous toys and machines up in the sky. So that kind of thing is like, okay, that changes everything. That little piece of information is such a big deal. There's like what came down, what did we find out, like who knew about it, how does this change who we are and how we operate, and what kinds of basements in Washington D.C. are people shitting their pants saying, what do we do, what do we do, what do we do, do we tell people, do we not tell people? And so like if you were to make a story around that, then I'm like, I'm all ears. Like then I'm like, okay, that's a life-changing little piece of information. And if you can wrap it within the kind of a world that I can relate to, because I was telling someone this the other day, like I love Spielberg's movies. Like obviously we all do. He's like the Beatles of directing. But I never really related to the people he put in his movies, like the kids on bikes are kids on bikes. But the kids I knew on bikes, were trying to tattoo themselves and probably doing a little bit of drugs or something or stealing money from their parents and like, getting in fights down the street. Like they're just rougher and just like, so for my version was like, we take these important story and we wrap it into this kind of Spielberg world, but the kids represent something that I'm more familiar with personally. And yeah, that's my really long speech right now, is to a sense of like why I read your books down to the sentence level is because what's within them is really important shit. But then it's also wrapped with, like in this story, it's wrapped with something very cultural, that, I can really relate to.
And I think, sometimes people ask me how we work together, and I've always thought that, one of the strength of any collaboration, and maybe this applies to being in a band as well, is that you bring different strengths. That the people, everybody involved works well together, but they also bring completely different things. And while you're thinking about those sort of big macro concerns, and for me, it's all about getting into the heads of the characters and the people, and and trying to draw the world that they live in as accurately as I can, so that that big canvas is populated by people who feel real. Because like I struggle sometimes with certain forms of fantasy and sci-fi where the world of the story is so unfamiliar that I can't relate to the people at all. That even if the story is kind of entertaining or interesting, there's a part of me that doesn't really care, that I got to see some version of the reality that I actually live in that story, you
That's
know.
it. Yeah, it's like so. And some of these big sci-fi movies, they try to like make you care about the characters, and it's like the dad has to go to work because he really loves his daughter, and he's like, gosh, and he's never there to help her with homework, but he goes, I'm a pilot, I'm gonna go fight aliens, and like it's just like they're trying to make you love the character and his daughter, but it's just like it's so vanilla. Like
Mhm.
everyone loves their daughter, like that's not gonna make me really care about the guy. Everyone I see at the grocery store loves their daughter. Like I don't care about them anymore, So what you do is you really like dig into the character and the way they see the world and the way they interact with it, and like and how that character would respond in the moment to something, and that's unique to that person. You can take anybody with with their friend, and when they go to they go outside of a bar, have a cigarette, and there's a car crash, they're both going to react different ways, probably
Right.
both excitable, but say different things and be fearful of different things. And one guy loses sleep and one guy doesn't because he's seen a car crash before or something, it's
Right.
just like, it's that's the shit that's really important. And and that's the stuff, honestly, that's not like, for me, it's like my skill set isn't that level of detail, because I've noticed, like with you and other authors, like to be an author, to be a really good author, and honestly, and a screenwriter, that because a screenwriter is like, even it's just a whole different kind of set of skills too, but you have to be able to be super hyper aware of the world around you at all times. Like you go to a restaurant with your family and you're probably noticing like how the waitress holds her pen, and how her hair is a little messed up and how she looks a little tired, and
And I'm
the
listening to the conversation at the table next to us.
Yeah, and you're just categorizing people all the time in their various states of life. Because it's like, and then you start reading people from afar, and you can go, okay, she's probably a single mother working here as a part-time job, and she's really stressed financially, and she smokes because she's anxious, probably about her act. You can probably put a whole story to it just because you know people so well at this point, and your family's like, can you join our dinner, please? Can you be
Yeah,
here?
absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's funny because when we were talking about doing research, I mean, I spent ages working on this book before I really wrote anything.
Oh, I could tell. I mean, when you start bringing back, because in a script, okay, so basically for people like listening, Trinity is a story about, two brothers essentially in a small town outside of what's known as the Nevada test site. Now, the Nevada test site is a huge area in Nevada where you have like Area 51 and 30 other various bases. None of them are necessarily working together. They're all doing crazy compartmentalized national security stuff. In Area 51, just that base goes back to the 50s when the CIA first built it. So now the Starfish Prime, I don't remember where that nuclear test took place. I knew it was in space, but I think it was somewhere over one of our deep oceans somewhere.
Yep.
But for our purposes, we moved it over to where the effects of it happened in a small town outside of the Nevada test site. Because at the time, back then 50s, during the 50s and for decades following, there were a lot of nuclear tests, and UFOs were showing up to monitor these things, and they were popping up on radar, and they were being photographed and filmed, and so on and so forth. And then there's also, when we were doing the Trinity nuclear tests, and that, there were a lot of reports and a lot of data and a lot of witnesses about another UFO crash that even happened back in like the 30s or early 40s or something. And so we basically said, let's put all this let's put this whole story out in a small town called Trinity, and we could tie it all together with this small town. And so the story is about these two brothers that grew up in a really difficult situation, and they are out doing what kids do at those times, where they're working on their fast cars, and they're working on trying just to work part-time jobs and take care of their own families and get by. Then they get caught up in where they knew there's going to be a nuke test, because the bases always plan those, so they would watch these things go off. Well, when there is this one, something falls out of the sky and it creates just a pandemonium in town, and next thing you know, there's military everywhere, and they're caught up in the middle of it. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the story is about. But in a script, it's so, as you know, it is so like technical, and there's no exposition. So on the page, it'd be like, this character walks in, grabs a drink of water, and sets it down. He pauses for a moment and looks at a photograph,
Mhm.
because you describe what you see on the screen,
Mhm.
and then the actor has to make that mean something. The actor has to look at the photograph and drink the water. Does he do it like he's angry? Does he do it like he's happy? Does he laugh a little bit? Does he
And
whatever?
all the visuals are being affected by your design team who've been working
Yeah.
on it,
Yes.
to make sure that everything looks right.
Is it a sad room? Is it a lived-in room? Is it look more like that he's, someone's poor or someone's wealthy or something, um, all these, yeah. But in a book, it's like you can have the character walk in, stare at the water, and have a flashback about drowning, and or being in an argument with his wife that always threw drinks in his face, or something,
Right.
like you can really go into crazy detail. And
And that detail is all you have, right? Because in a book, it's literally just the words. It's you as a reader processing and responding to the words, and that's all there is.
that's good though.
There's no soundtrack. There's no.
Descriptions of the cars and the engines, and like it was so awesome. Like to go back to what you're saying, like the kind of the research you were doing, like it's evident on page one, and like in a movie script, unless you have a character talk about the engine, which most likely, I mean, that's not your priority, like you have such little you have, everything has to be quick and to the point and make sense and push the story forward. And talking about the engine might not push the story forward necessarily. You
Right.
could see these kids work on cars. They mention their cars faster than yours, so that cars are important, but they might not be talking about the way the pistons move or something. But you did that, and so you brought that car culture to life, and that's the essence of like what you do so well. Like it's you can tell as you read the story, like these kids live in a world where this shit's important to them. That's what they think. Because if you are that kid, it's like me on, like when I was skateboarding, like I would know the hardness of the wheel and which ball bearings like went faster and better, which trucks that held the wheels, would break or not break, or which were better for, what dimensions were better for, ramp skating or street skating, or like I'm thinking about it. Like if I'm a skateboarder, I'm like, oh, that company makes the sickest wheels, but I would get the hardness level of this, and I would get the German bearings, and I would get like I would know the technical little details because that's all I cared about. You made
Mhm.
that happen for these kids. Like they care about cars and shit. So it's that they talk about it and they think about it the way one would, and that takes a lot of like research, and that's you really excel at that.
A lot of conversations with one of my older neighbors as well, who used to be a big car head when he was young.
Oh, cool.
It makes a change when I was working on Secret Machines and I was interviewing fighter pilots and stuff to, sort of get a sense of how a particular aircraft handles, So we went from that to talking to my neighbor about, yeah, exactly how do you take this engine apart, stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. I always wish I knew how to work on cars. I always feel like less of a man because I don't know. And everyone like they start talking about engines and shit. And I'm like, fuck, I literally know nothing about cars. I just have never had the time. But the idea of it seems really cool to me. Like
Mm.
the idea, if I knew about cars, I feel like that'd be very beneficial to my ego, you know?
But I remember when I got my first car, because growing up in the UK, most of the time I went everywhere on the bus or on my bike. and I didn't even learn to drive till I came to the States. And by then, cars are all computerized and stuff. And I was like, great, I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna be a mechanic for my own car and stuff. And the first time something
No
went
way.
wrong, they were like, yeah, no, you're not gonna do that by yourself. All of this needs reprogramming, and you gotta. And I'm like,
It's crazy. There's like 60 computer chips in cars now. It's like crazy. Yeah. No,
yeah.
yeah, like, you take it in there and they hook a big cable up to it and the computer tells you what to do. It's just wild. Yeah, wild. But that's what's kind of cool about the cars in the 60s and the whole culture and stuff. These things were really like, malleable. Like you can get in there and change things and do things and customize it and it was such a big part of American culture. Where was car culture ever big in the UK like this? Not like America, but
Not like
anything like
America. I mean, you know what it's like in the UK. Apart from anything else, you don't have the space. You don't have those big
that?
open
Yeah.
freeways and stuff. It's just it's different. And of course, in the sort of post-war years when car culture was really taking off in the US, nobody in England had any money. It took decades to recover from the war. So
Remember the
yeah,
car? You remember the car the Germans made, the Nazis made? That was like the perfect car for everybody.
the
It
bubble car, or
was
like the sort of the, what do you call it?
Beetle.
Yeah, the B
The
the VW, yeah.
saw that on, like the History Channel one time. There was like a documentary on that car. I never knew it. I just thought it was just a bitchin' little like car.
Yeah.
But they came up with this idea of the car that fits everyone. Typical World War II thinking. Like
Right.
the Nazi thinking where everything's the same and perfect and but
Those
it's
cars
funny.
are virtually I mean, they're sort of watertight, right? Pretty much they were.
Were they really?
yeah,
Wow.
apparently you didn't need to do that much work. I think somebody actually drove one across the English Channel with like an outboard motor fastened to the back of it.
That is way too
I
funny.
mean, they probably had to weld some stuff shut,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. No, but the car culture thing in the United States was because I think it's like you said, yeah, we just had just big open spaces with big highways out in the desert and the idea of a road trip, because even in Europe you can't do that because you're going country to country to country until the EU was formed. Just now it's easier maybe, but like for the United States, I mean, we
Not
have
for the Brits.
for the Brits, yeah, you guys are stuck on an island, yeah. But with the
Absolutely.
United States, like you could just drive all the way up the coast of California. Everyone wanted to take the highways to the desert of Arizona and Texas, and like that's kind of became. And also too, it's like we would, like it was also the ability to like, vacationing in the United States is fun because you can go to the deserts or the mountains or the forests. I mean, so you're always driving because all these places are accessible.
And
Um,
cars was such a sort of index of what was going on in the larger culture. I mean, one of the things I found fascinating as I was researching it was how much car design was shaped by the space race and by that sort of late 50s, early 60s obsession with, the sort of George Jetson version of what the future was going to be kind of thing, and you get all those the tail fins and the nacelles basically and the little lights and stuff, and they look like rocket ships.
they really did. That's interesting. I never thought of that that they really did. That's yeah, and it's interesting too, like getting into like then you see like in the 70s, all the muscle cars and stuff. And if you look at like stories being told during that time frame, it was always just like renegade,
Yeah,
anti-hero kind of cops just going and shoot everybody.
yeah,
This is
yeah, yeah,
muscle testosterone, Mad Max kind of stuff, and
yeah.
um, but there's a romanticism, I think, in the 60s. Um, there's a lot of painful civil rights type stuff, but there's also a lot of growth.
Mm.
There's all the JFK types, where everyone's dreaming and hopeful, and then he got killed. All right, so much
Right.
for those dreams, that hope, all the car culture was really the beginnings of all that kind of stuff. A lot of the great music, a lot of the great, you had black music really starting to bleed into the white music and really becoming like us finding sports too. You had like all the um, black athletes coming in and like the segregation was starting to trickle away a little bit. I mean, I know it wasn't fixed or whatever, but it was a really great kind of moment in American history that showed a lot of pain with a lot of growth. Um,
And it was one of those moments also where America is constantly sort of performing for itself, what makes it different from the Soviet Union, right? Because that's another theme within the book, that the space race and all the rest of it and everything that's going on in terms of the personal culture is always sort of what makes America America, as opposed to the other big power, which is sort of up there with Sputnik and what have you, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And we have a bit of that in the book in the sense of, when this is me even knowing, because talking to, uh, well, I mean, shit had happened to me. I don't know if I've told this story. I'm sure I've told this story somewhere, like on a podcast or something. But so we have a piece of, and this kind of maps up with our story a little bit. So To the Stars has a piece of wreckage from a crashed craft in the 40s, purportedly, but we all the studies on it showed that it was pretty fucking, it was pretty artificial looking. It was pretty um, highly engineered at a metamaterial level, which is like kind of atomically made, and it looked to have some very unusual properties. So it went under contract with the U.S. Army. And then after that went on and was studied by the Congressional UFO Task Force and some of the national laboratories. So we're still in the middle of that. We have our own scientists going out to read the reports and see what they found versus what we already know about it. And so hope more on that later. But what is interesting is we were showing that piece in New York. We had like a penthouse in Manhattan that was kind of like a big commercial space where we rented a whole floor. And we only invited like 12 people. And these were actually just investors. This is when To the Stars Academy of Science was just starting. And these investors show up, and it's a small talk. It's like me and my other government partners that are there, including Lou, that was over at the Pentagon with the UFO program, and Jim Simovan, which is CIA, and some others. Well, two people come up out of the elevator that weren't invited. They were Russians, and they were Russian spies. And they made it into our small little party. And I'm sitting there like in a suit, with our books, and probably had secret machines on a table and a bunch of stuff about the programs. And we were talking about, we had the piece there under a glass box with two armed guards. And these two Russian spies show up, and the reason I knew they were Russian spies is because they walk in with these thick Russian accents, and I knew that they weren't invited. So I look at Jim, my partner, who is like one of the senior level spies at CIA, and I was like, "The fuck are these guys?" His face just kind of dropped, and he just walks right away from me. Tells the guys to stand in front of them at peace with their guns. Don't let these two guys anywhere near it. Lou was already giving the speech. So Lou notices these guys, and Lou's talking to the other 12 people. They're in chairs, and he's kind of at a little podium. And so Lou does this little thing with his phone. He's like, for example, everyone shut off your phones. I want to tell you something about your phone, And he did that during his speech on a whim to see if the Russian in the back would turn off his phone, which he didn't, because the guy was recording the entire thing. And the other guy disappeared. So Jim is walking around trying to figure out where this other guy went, because we're in this massive kind of commercial space. We don't know where the guy went. He's checking the bathroom stalls and everything. And right before Lou's finished with his speech, the Russian turns off his phone and walks out back to the elevator. The other guy shows up, who knows where he was at, and they get in the elevator and leave. And I asked Jim, I was like, how the fuck did that happen? And what is going on? And Jim goes, yeah, what do you say? They're on what we call the cocktail circuit. They just cruise around and they just gather up information on the important shit in town. And this is obviously extremely important because we have a piece that's potentially from a crashed, UAP. And we have guys that ran the program and guys that are senior level management at CIA, all in this one room, and how this kind of maps up with Trinity is that, there is a Soviet spy involved in the story, because they were embedded in society around all the nuclear tests and the important military bases. And their job is to go be on the cocktail circuit and to gather information. And if something ever needed to happen, they would be the ones called on to do it, So it kind of gives you a lay of the land in the nuclear age, and the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
Those things existed. They existed in my life, but they existed even more so then.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because it's something that has come up a few times recently. Because as we said at the start, you and I have been talking for 10 years. The conversation nationally, internationally has changed quite a bit within that 10-year span in terms of, the attention and the seriousness with which people discuss UAPs and congressional hearings and all that sort of stuff. To what extent do you think you have been a part of that
Oh
shift?
gosh. Um, I literally feel responsible for starting it, and I don't say that from an ego point of view at all. I'm saying it because I'm the greatest man that's ever lived. No, I'm just joking. But I literally feel that I did, in this because I know what happened and what I went through to get to all these little things that did it, like I remember the very, very beginning moments of me talking to people and pitching things and flying by the seat of my pants and manipulating just to get people kind of to back me up. And next thing you know, I'm with the people that matter. And then I meet a bunch more people that really matter, and then those people are now involved over at Congress and getting people briefed and getting committees briefed, and so all the things that are happening or that happened over the past few years, like on the news, and getting Congress to know what's going on and getting the open hearings and all that kind of shit. I didn't do that stuff, but the reason all that stuff happened was because my guys got that stuff to happen, and my guys only came aboard because I did the things before them that gave them a platform to attach to actually, as a group, we can all get something done,
Mm.
um, more powerfully. But and the crazy thing is like I never thought about it till this moment, but like that is something really cool about Western society and governments and stuff. Like we actually I spirited change, like I really from a grassroots level, like the most classified, the most secret, the most locked away information that has ever existed. A punk rock kid with a skateboard, was able to create enough waves that got more people on the boat to get that thing sailing and make some
Mm-mm.
change. That's a
How
big
do
deal.
you feel? How do you respond when people say, "Oh, well, if disclosure is the focus, then you shouldn't be doing fiction."
Um, I don't. Yeah, I no. This is the problem. Is like people love to have like binary thoughts on big matters, and it just you can't. The world is not black and white. There's infinite series of gray in it. So you're like, okay, if we're trying to get the truth, then you either tell us the truth or don't tell us anything. And we're like, well, what if in the middle was we have to tell you that there's some things we can't tell you because it's inherently dangerous, catastrophically dangerous to tell you certain things, but we need you to know certain things because it would be catastrophically dangerous to society for you not to know anything. Like that's not a black and white issue. That's like, okay, there's some shades of gray there. And the other thing is like, well, how do we come out and just tell you some of these things, to where you guys have an understanding of like what's going on and what we're dealing with. And I have found that the arts have always worked better for example, we all went to school and studied fucking loads and loads of history. And I don't remember any of it, honestly. But if I was on the Discovery Channel or History Channel and I see a sick documentary, about World War II or something, and it's just like one little facet of that, I go, whoa, the music's right, the editing's right, the story's concise, the imagery is like on point. Like I will retain that information so much more
Mm.
because it evokes emotion and it's messaged in a way that I can just retain it.
Mm.
It's like we can all hear the story of how Facebook started, but go watch the movie Social Network and tell me you're not going to retain like the more human experience of that story if because the way it was done. So I feel that some of this information is much more likely to get our society in a better spot if it's told through the arts. Simply because imagine imagine you're working for the Department of Defense back in the 40s, in the 50s, and you're just like a normal dude and you went to some college or you're in the Air Force Academy. I guess the Air Force didn't exist at the time necessarily. Well, it did in the late 40s, but my point being, you got your job and you moved through the ranks. And then all of a sudden one day there's like a spaceship that crashed or some kind of craft that's more that could travel through time, or it's like fucking got these occupants that I mean, the amount of fear of like the enormity of that. And then you're the guy that's supposed to figure out what to do with this thing. And it's like my partner's always said, it's like handing an iPhone to a cow. And the cow is supposed to know how to describe it and what to do with it, has no concept, you know? And so it's like it's a really big, difficult, scary, perplexing issue, and changing the way we view ourselves, the way we view the universe, changing the way we view physics, changing the way we view religion, and all that takes so long to have an understanding, because at the same time, I don't think there's ever any like quote unquote aliens landing saying this is who we are and this is what we do and this is how the universe works. I think we're waiting for years in between these episodic visits where we learn little morsels of information and find out how things parse together or don't. And so during that time frame, we're all like, you know, screaming that we should know more information. And the government's like, we don't even know all the information, you know, and it's scary, you know. So the arts can come in, and how do you explain that kind of difficulty of a problem and the emotion involved and just the normal humanity involved? Well, the arts can kind of do that. Like it's like if the movie Oppenheimer came out, none of us would have known the struggle all the scientists were having letting this be unleashed upon the world. The
Mhm.
movie really put that forward, that the scientists involved in making the bomb were really conflicted about it, to the point that they're doing petitions and trying to shut it all down and back channel and all this weird shit. And it really shows you like the enormity of the issue they were dealing with. Gave you a new healthy respect for how hard it is to be in those positions.
Mm.
And that's what the UFO subject needs, in my opinion, is like the world needs to understand how scary and perplexing and difficult and how much gravity there is to being in those positions to deal with that subject. And now you'll understand why they're not just running out and telling us everything,
Mm.
because they're still in a big world of shades of gray on it. Like I don't think they all feel like they've learned it all, you know, that they know everything that's going on. I think they know enough to where they feel like this is not a good thing, you know. And if it's not a good thing, then let's really fucking understand where we sit with it and how we're going to handle it, how we're going to communicate it, and all these different things. And I just happen to be in a weird, unique situation where I've learned enough about it that I think some people on that side of the fence are like, maybe he can explain it a little bit, you know. And I'm like, I'll try, you know.
Mm.
We'll see, you know.
Well, it's all part of an ongoing project. This Trinity is not a Secret Machines book per se. There will be, let me say this again for the thousandth time, there will be a third Secret Machines novel eventually,
Yes, there will be.
but
Yes,
but we haven't done it
yes.
yet.
People know, it's like we set that up over at Legendary Entertainment, and it's super exciting. Um, the pilot script is finished, and they're doing all the things that they do, or they attach the right directors and actors and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really excited about all the potential with that. And I think once we kind of get that up and running and we have an idea of how that plays out, is when we're going to start talking about, you know, book 3. But I do know that Everyone Up to the Stars, in the sense of like Hal and Jim and you know, the government peeps and myself, I think we have a lot of really exciting things that we want in there. And I especially even Jim's really very, very passionate about the Secret Machine stories. And because he got very involved with Peter Levenda, that did the Gods, Man, and War nonfiction parts for Secret Machines, and Jim was very, very involved in a lot of that with Peter. And so I think that book 3 needs to be nothing less than the best one of the three, you know, and I'm really excited for when we do that.
No pressure.
No pressure. And it's got to be 720 pages, or I don't know. Those other ones are like 700. You got to like beat it by just a few pages, like, you know.
Okay, well, I know that I can't keep you forever. The last thing I wanted to say, part of as we started with talking about you being on tour, this is partly why you and I are not doing any in-person events for this book, at least not this year. So, but I'm doing 2 in-person events, one June 19th here in Charlotte at Park Road Books, and one on July 27th at the Waterstones in Preston in Lancashire in England. These are both my hometowns, effectively. And the
Nice.
idea is that we'll have some signed book plates from you. I don't know if you've done those yet.
Yep, I've got a bunch, and I have more literally right over there.
Okay.
Until the
Um,
least that I haven't completed at these things.
So, if I have no idea to what extent people have already reserved all the ones, but you can contact those stores directly and maybe claim one and be at the event or have them mail it to you or something. So that's it. Anything else
Yeah,
you
and
want to add?
yeah, I love this story so much. This is a film, this is a story where we have a script already ready. This is something that I'm looking to be directing. This story is going to have its day in court, as we say. So I really want any of my fans, or any of your fans, anybody that follows the UFO subject, to know that we're going to be coming out swinging hard with Trinity over the coming years. And I
Mm.
say years in the sense because it takes a while to make a film, a feature. But we're excited for people to dig into this, and I think it's just going to be a fantastic movie. And the book just immerses you into that world so much better. It's gonna be one of those things where they see the movie, it's not as good as the book, and I'll be like, God damn it, just like it all and be thankful. Okay, just be thankful. You know.
Yeah, we want this to be To the Stars' first bestseller, right?
Yeah, that would
Oh.
be bitching.
All
All
right.
right. Thank
Well,
you so
thanks,
much.
man. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Too.
All right, turn the... And that's it. As ever, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my books, of course, including particularly Trinity. I'll include the details of those signing events in the description. Check out my other merchandise. Check out my Patreon page. Thank you, as ever, to my patrons who make this channel possible. And hopefully you'll get to have a look at Trinity and enjoy it. I hope you have fun with it. All right, that's all for now. Thanks. Bye.